Hey, welcome to another video by MarketLytics. In our last video, Hussein discussed Google Tag Manager and some hard-won lessons about is GTM the right tool for you, planning requirements using data maps, winning support with developers for the implementation, as well as extracting benefits of GTM once it is implemented. You can click here to see the last video. In this video, Hussein will elaborate on how you can work successfully with developers in order to achieve the best results.
Hi everyone. So my name is Hussein. I run a consultancy called MarketLytics. One of the things that we've done actually a lot over the last 5 years is work with Tag Manager. And a common question that we have in Tag Manager is how how do we actually leverage Tag Manager in a way that it delivers all the benefits that people expect. Awesome. So let's start with the first part, which is first, really working with the developers and like how to make sure that developers are successful. And the main way to sort of do that is making sure that the developers have extremely clear instructions about what they want to do and what they are, what they are going to be delivering and what their expectations are. And the way we do this is we make sure that the site and the information that we need is very well documented. And this is the way we sort of do it internally. So we have this document which has all the different code changes that we would want, along with where they should be added, what is the expected information to add to them, those things. And this is what we consider a code spec, which comes in extremely handy when you're, sort of taking the next step and sharing this with the developers. And I think like everyone sort of appreciates some good code and some things like very organized, and it helps them like very clearly see how much effort it would be. And typically you can actually break this down into like smaller chunks as well, depending on like what the availability is and what the priorities are at the moment. Cool. So you did this exercise. You sent this stuff over to the developers. The developers implemented it. Hopefully, there weren't like major issues because you followed this process, and then based off of that, you got some, data on your page. This would be what is considered a data layer in Google Tag Manager terms. This data layer is effectively your layer of information that is going to be available on all the pages. And then now the next step is actually configuring Tag Manager so you can sort of use this information extremely easily. And at this point, we'll talk about like a few of the components that we have, right? Cool. So the next step is, some fundamentals about Tag Manager. So Tag Manager primarily has three components. The first component is a variable, which is a piece of information that is being used by Tag Manager. And you could have like multiple types of variables. The most common ones are, your standard kind of constant variables, JavaScript variables. You could also have like scripts and functions as variables. There's a lot of helper functions that Tag Manager provides for things like button clicks. You'll get like elements and classes and all these things. So understanding that this is like the first kind of base component is very important, because any sort of information that you're going to use, it's going to come from a variable. From the variables, you next have triggers. So triggers are a way to, of course, like trigger an action, right? So it's a way to sort of fire something, or a rule which, when is true or is validated, would trigger some particular tag. You can think of this as like a conditional thing where you say, if this variable or this variable has X or YZ value, do this other action. And we're going to like talk about a few examples of this. And the last one is tags. So tags is the actual mechanism with which the data gets sent into the platforms. So tags is a combination of variables that define what data is being sent, as well as sort of the structure of scripts that that the platform needs, and lastly, triggers which define when it would be triggered. Cool. And you can sort of see an example of this here, where we have a bunch of data which is validated based on a rule on the order completed page. So whenever the page is order completed, and it would send information to Facebook, e-commerce and AdWords. and to each of them it's like named differently, but you're effectively sending the revenue amount for the order to the to each of these platforms. Cool. So that's additionally sort of the fundamentals, right? But this approach is, because it's like built in these smaller building blocks, it's very, very flexible. So you can have the same thing repurposed and reused very, very easily. So think of this data map that we built earlier in the process. So you had product information, but maybe there's like certain platforms that only need the product price and product name. The other might need the SKU. The other might need something else. So you can use all of those things together if you need to, but also based on like specific conditions. And this thing also comes in handy at the trigger stage. So you may want to only trigger a tag if multiple conditions are met. So instead of triggering a tag when every order is completed, you may want to only trigger a tag when a certain product is being purchased, or if the order value is above a certain point. Similarly, like with abandoned cart, you may have a tag that you only want to trigger to at a point when the order cart value is greater than a certain amount or less than a certain amount. Cool. And of course you can sort of control the tags that you trigger based off of it. Lastly, again, we should touch on documenting what's been done and how it's been set up, right? So the main thing is that we should document everything that we've done so far to make the job of the next person that comes into this very easy. And this is actually another template that we use to document these sort of things. So we explain what was set up, where does it send data, why is it set up, and when does it like work. Again, like the reusability is pretty much critical to making sure that the setup is used properly. So you have to make sure that the same thing is implemented in a way that it could be very, very easily reused. And the documentation part that we touched on earlier is very, very important. So making sure that the documentation is in a way that it could be understood by other people and they're not trying to reinvent the wheel, is critical to making sure that this entire exercise is successful. Awesome. So yeah, foundationally, like the reason this approach works extremely well is if you break down the information that these tags are using, they are typically using the same information, right? So as we sort of touched on, that they might use the product price or the product SKU or the product name, but at the same time, the other benefit of Tag Manager is that it allows you to actually transform that information, as long as you have the raw information available, in a format that particular platform expects. So for example, there's an ad platform called Criteo, which expects the order price to be in cents instead of dollars. So as long as you have the price in dollars, you can multiply it by 100 and get like the price in cents. Typically, this step would have been done within your code itself. But now that we have the information in Tag Manager, what we can do is we can actually use the variables and use a variable that has a product price and then build another variable that takes that product price and multiplies it by 100 and returns the value in cents, right? So this sort of transformation makes it extremely flexible, because as long as you understand what information is available and it is in a format that it could be like easily transformed into other things, the reusability increases significantly. Awesome. So yeah, so just making sure that this setup works is a bit of an exercise upfront, but if you invest this time, and generally like good times to sort of do this is when you're replatforming or when you're about to launch a new tag that already needs all these changes. It may you might as well sort of do it through Tag Manager. So the information is available for that tag, but also for any future tags. And yeah. So one of the case studies that I want to talk about. One of the successes of this approach that I want to talk about was an online travel agent out of South America that we worked with. So at the time, they were going through like some extreme growth. So they were actually like one of the fastest growing online travel agents at the time. And because of this, they were experimenting with dozens of different platforms. And one major issue was accuracy between different platforms. So they didn't have a good way to see if the same information was being sent to all these platforms. And we sort of collaborated with them and figured out this approach of like what the data map should be, what information we would want to collect, and built a tag manager structure that made sure that there was only one way to get information into all these platforms, and that was through tag manager. So we moved everything into tag manager, and we organized it in a way that if any new platforms came on board, they didn't have to go back and make changes. And it was like fairly successful when we kind of went back and reviewed this. Their time to sort of deploy new code changes was reduced because the developers only had to implement one type of change. So that went from like a very sort of high number into multiple weeks into a few days. Similarly, for a lot of their tags, they never actually had to deploy new code. They could just reuse what was already in Tag Manager. So that was like a huge improvement as well. And interestingly enough, they've continued to sort of grow and like experiment with multiple new platforms, but they've not had to make any code changes to their data layer in the last 12 months. So they've still continued to experiment without having to overload their developers with new requests. So I hope this helps. And if you have any questions or if you have any feedback on how you've organized this process in the past, I'd love to hear it. Thank you.